Hi everybody and welcome to Heel Heat. My name is George Coles, and on this episode we're doing a top 10. Topic of this top 10, top 10 worst WrestleMania matches. Now at this point, there have been 40 WrestleManias. There have been plenty of opportunities for bad or terrible matches to appear on the show. In my opinion, these are the 10 worst, so let's jump right into it. Number 10, from WrestleMania 27, you're going to hear that WrestleMania a couple times here. Bret the Hitman Hart versus Vince McMahon. Look, this match, it's not as terrible as some of the ones you'll see later on the list, hence why it's all the way down this far. The biggest thing that hurts this match is it went 25 minutes. And neither one of these guys was in the condition to go 25 minutes. If they would cram this down to a 7-8 minute match, I would have probably loved it, because there were some elements of this I really liked. I liked the fact that Vince tried to pay off the Hart family, but they stuck with their family. I liked the fact of Bret getting his comeuppance all these years later after the Montreal Screwjob, which is still being talked about today. There was some good here. The main problem I think it is the length of it. Like I said, if this was a 7-minute match, I probably would have thought of it fondly. I'll go from that on. Number 9, Jake the Snake Roberts versus Rick the Model Martel in a blindfold match at WrestleMania 7. Now this one's kind of funny. As a kid, I kind of enjoyed this match. Now, was it my favorite match? No. But I kind of liked the idea of the different stipulation. However, upon watching it back, it's not a fun match. They were over with the crowd. Jake was super over, pointing and just getting the fans to tell him where to go. That was really a good idea. I think this gimmick, while innovative and while interesting, it doesn't really play out in the real world as something that's going to make really compelling television. I like both these wrestlers, especially in this time frame, but this match, it just doesn't do it for me. I'll go from that on number 8. From WrestleMania 36, Goldberg versus Braun Strowman. There have been a good number of Goldberg stinkers over his return to WWE over the last decade or so, and this to me is definitely one of them. There's something about this where Goldberg has never really been a ring general, and Strowman at this time especially wasn't anywhere near that either. I don't think either man was going to bring a great match out of each other. A lot of this also has to do with the time. This is pandemic era, which is not great all in itself. Thought this was a stinker. I didn't like it at all. Now going up next, number 7. From WrestleMania 23, The Great Khali versus Kane. Now I've mentioned before, and I probably said it 1,000 times, that Kane is one of my favorite wrestlers, one of my favorite big men of all time. This is his worst WrestleMania match. And when you think about the wrestlers he's wrestled at WrestleMania, that's kind of saying something. I'm not usually one to dump on Great Khali and talk about how bad he was. He was never the greatest wrestler, but to me, he wasn't terrible. He was serviceable. In this match, he was terrible. Something about this just didn't click. It just didn't work. They had a terrible match, hence why it's on our list here. Now, next up at number 6, we have Trish Stratus, Snooki, and John Morrison going up against Layla, Michelle McCool, and Dolph Ziggler. This was a train wreck. This is and this was from WrestleMania 27, our second entry from WrestleMania 27. This is famously the match where John Morrison was ignoring his teammates because of his girlfriend at the time, which I believe was Melina still. And he was uninterested. He looked like he didn't care. The match came off as a mess. Snooki, for her involvement, she wasn't terrible. If you were to put this on paper beforehand and say who's going to be the person that makes this bad, it's going to be Snooki. But it wasn't her. It was Morrison. Morrison tanked this match. With as good as a wrestler as he is, as good as a wrestler Ziggler is, Lay Cool is probably 2 of the top women wrestlers of that time. Trish Stratus right up there as well. They could have done something really fun here. Backstage turmoil and personal gripes, I guess you could say, made this very bad. I don't know, I just didn't like it. This is one of those instances where ego got in the way. Next up, at number 5, from WrestleMania 21, Big Show versus Aki Bono. Big Show around this time was being used as a guy to bring in celebrities, whether it be Shaq, Floyd Mayweather, in this case, Aki Bono, and they had a quasi-sumo match. To me, anytime you try to work something that's not wrestling, whether it be boxing, MMA, sumo, it always looks terrible. And this is no fault of Big Show, no fault of Akebono. Akebono's a legend in sumo. Big Show is probably better than you think in your head because of all the bad booking decisions. It makes you think worse of him than he was. This wasn't a great match, unfortunately. That's why it makes our list here. I'll go from that, our number 4. From WrestleMania 9, this includes a wrestler that I consider one of the great WrestleMania performers of all time, along with Bret Hart, of course, who got on this list too. Giant Gonzalez versus The Undertaker. I tend to, much like with Khali, give Giant Gonzalez a bit of a break. He was rushed into wrestling. He came into it with bad knees. He came into it with not the greatest amount of training. He was a sight to be seen. This is in that early run of Taker matches where he fought giants and big men. Just not a great match. I think Undertaker will tell you that himself. It wasn't fun, and I believe, spoiler, it ended in a DQ, if I remember right, because of Khali using chloroform. Anyway, not a great match. That's why it's here at number 4. I'll go from that, our number 3. From all the way back at WrestleMania 2, one of my favorite wrestlers of all time and the wrestler that got me started watching wrestling, Roddy Piper versus Mr. T in a boxing match. Remember what I said earlier about working other sports like sumo wrestling or boxing or MMA? Here's an example where you tried to work a boxing match. This felt clunky and awkward. It felt phony, even at the time. Even as a little kid, as I'm watching this, it felt faker than everything else. And that's not a word I like to use with wrestling. I know there was animosity between the two that maybe didn't make this as good as it could have been, but I don't think that you could have had anything great come of this. I would have much rather have seen Piper vs. Hogan or even Piper vs. Mr. T in a wrestling match. This wasn't great. That's why it makes our list here. I'll go from that, our number 2. From WrestleMania 25, the Miss WrestleMania Battle Royal. And a lot of this goes to the fact that Santina, aka Santino Marella's sister, which is just him in drag, wins this match. And let me mention some of the people that were in this match with him that I think would have been better ideas to win. Gail Kim, Mickie James, Natalya, Beth Phoenix, both the Bella Twins, Melina, both of Lay Cool, and several others. This is the era, I guess you would say, the Divas era, where they didn't care about the women other than to put them out there for eye candy and to put them in joke matches like this. Just a disappointing match. There was so much great talent in there that probably deserved a WrestleMania win, even in a bad Battle Royal match, but he gave it to Santina. Now, before we get to our number 1, we do a thing here called the best of the rest. Basically, these were matches that were thought of for the list but didn't quite make it. First up, from WrestleMania 33, Bray Wyatt versus Randy Orton. And this was a match I was actually there live to watch. In concept, I think this went off a lot better than it did in actuality. What you're going to remember from this is a match where they projected worms and flies and all different kind of stuff onto the mat. These are two extremely talented wrestlers, and it's one of the times that Bray Wyatt struck out. I have to think that this was mostly his idea just because of how creative he was. And sometimes there were a few times where his idea just didn't work. This, for me, was one of those times. It wasn't quite as bad as the others that made it to this list, but it was definitely thought of. Last but not least, on the best of the rest, from WrestleMania 20, Goldberg vs. Brock Lesnar. This match had a stink on it from the beginning. The fans knew that both wrestlers were leaving the company. Both wrestlers kind of phoned in the match. I don't think they do an actual move for almost 6 minutes into the match, or 7 minutes. The only saving grace, in my opinion, is when they got started, it wasn't terrible, and Steve Austin did his best as a referee to make this feel more important and better than it was. Not a great match. I don't think either one of these guys think of this as their high point of the career. That's why it was thought of. Didn't quite make the list. Now, before I get to my number 1, if you think I put a match too high, put a match too low, left one on the list altogether, let me know down here in the comments. While you're there, hit the like button, share the video, subscribe if you haven't. With all that being said, our number 1 worst WrestleMania match, the third time We're going to mention WrestleMania 27, which, in my opinion, is the worst WrestleMania of them all, and the worst match in WrestleMania history, Michael Cole versus Jerry the King Lawler. Again, with Stone Cold as the referee. Maybe Stone Cold's the kiss of death in WrestleMania. All the problems I had with Brett versus Vince and the length of it, times that by 3 here. Michael Cole had no business being in the ring for over 20 minutes with Jerry Lawler. I believe, and I might be wrong, if I'm wrong, let me know in the comments, I believe this is Jerry Lawler's only WrestleMania match. Jerry the King Lawler, one of the greats of all time. And if you want to think of his contributions to WrestleMania as an in-ring performer, this is what we have. This was god-awful terrible. There was nothing redeeming about this match. There was no fun to be had here. It was long. It was boring. It was bad. I can't say anything good about this. I can't even think of a good idea to put in here. To me, I think it is by far the worst match in the history of WrestleMania. I think everything else is a distant second and beyond. But this one, I think this would be a terrible match at a house show. I think this would be a terrible match at an indie show. It is just that bad. It is one of the worst matches that's ever been on TV, in my opinion. But that's why it's here at number 1. And again, if you think I put something too high, too low, left it off the list, let me know. With all that being said, my name is George Coles, and you've been watching another Heel Heat Top 10.